When Jesus and his disciples were walking around Caesarea Philippi, they were surrounded by gods of every kind. Caesarea Philippi was one of Caesar's cities, a place where people of every faith tradition came to honor and offer homage to Caesar, and while there also to the God of their choice. Even today, 2,000 years after Jesus, you can walk around the ancient city of Caesarea Philippi, looking at the niches that are carved out of the rocks, imagining where a statue to one deity or another might be placed. It's a place of infinite options, where one could choose to worship this God today and that God tomorrow. In a way, this is sort of like the environment that we all live in together. We live in a time and a culture where we can choose to explore or affiliate with any religion, or none, or many. To our culture, the faith tradition of our childhood, of our family or friends or history doesn't necessarily matter. We can choose to stick with the way we were raised, or make another choice. We live in an everyday Caesarea Philippi, a place of infinite possibilities. In our gospel reading, it's significant that it is here, in a place like our world today, in this place of endless options, that Jesus asks his disciples, surrounded by all these niches, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" The disciples dither in their responses. Well, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, some say Jeremiah or another prophet. It's kind of like they're saying, pick an important figure from our religious past or present. The Son of Man could be any of these. But then Jesus gets more personal. He says to the disciples, "But who do you say that I am?" Here in this place of every choice and no choice, where you could claim any god or no gods, Simon Peter gives the answer that changes everything. Peter says, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Peter claims that Jesus is God, and that claim changes the course of history. It's why we all sit here today. And the same question is the one we're faced with. Who do we say Jesus is? There are lots of places we can go for assistance. Isaiah, in our reading this morning, encourages us to look to the rock from which you were hewn, and to the quarry from which you were dug. We can look to our families of origin and our childhood foundations of faith. They can be very helpful in encouraging us as we go through life, giving us a grounding in the constancy and faithfulness of God. We can ask others for their perspectives. We can learn from them, and we can broaden our own ideas through conversation and learning. But eventually, we all have to come to our own conclusions on this question. As we consider our options, we remember that God first chose, and God first claimed us in our baptism. Before we choose any answer in the pantheon of answers or do a single thing, God has already reached out to us in love. And God continues to do that for us always. Over time, God leads and guides us. God transforms us if we're open to it, and if we're able to relax our desire for control a little bit. You see, God is always at work in our lives and in the world. As Peter says in our gospel reading, Jesus is the Son of the living God. A living God is moving, changing, dynamic. A living God is not static or dead or relegated to the past or some small part of our lives. It's easy to sometimes get stuck in thinking that God is not alive, that our world is a scary place, or too far gone, from God for God to really do anything about it. It's easy, and sometimes we wonder if God is really at work. If this is the case, then why do so many children struggle with hunger? Why do mass shootings and other violence seem to happen more and more? Why do white supremacists openly and publicly proclaim hatred for African Americans? Why do war and violence take up so much space on our news and so much space in our heads and in our hearts? And then there are all the whys of our own individual lives and circumstances. When we aren't sure if our God is a living God, these questions get us stuck in our worry. This morning I want to invite us all to shift our perspective, to beginning our life of faith trusting that we are named, claimed, and loved by a living God. A living God who is still working, who is still speaking into the lives and the challenges we face. A living God who is not bound to words on a page, even a sacred text like the Scriptures, but a living God who is free to move and work and surprise us in new life-giving ways. By claiming that Jesus is the Son of this living God, we then are invited to partner with a God who has a power to really change things and to really make them new. We get to be a part of this change. We can spend our lives working for good with our living God. As the psalmist puts it, "You will make good your purpose for me, O Lord. Your steadfast love endures forever." After Peter's confession in our gospel, Jesus says to him, "I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." As followers of the living God, we are vessels of God's love and mercy on earth. What we say and do matters. When we speak up to protect those who are vulnerable and in need, we join in God's work of changing the world, one moment at a time. When we seek to understand those who are different from us, coming from a place of genuine curiosity and love, we join in God's work of changing the world, making it more hospitable, one relationship at a time. In our world and culture of endless choice, we are first chosen in love by God. And that makes all the difference in how we see the world. We then can respond by affirming that Jesus is indeed the Messiah, the Son of the living God, which then we get to partner with this living God together, working to build a church in a world that is filled with justice, love, and peace. Things that God proclaims, things that we are called to live out with God and one another and our neighbors near and far. We choose this life in freedom, in gratitude, because God has first chosen us. Always and forever, God chooses you in love. Amen.